Okay, so we're going to be talking about how to launch a product with WordPress. I probably launched over 20 products in the last 3.5 years. So I've done this a lot. I do not know how to do this without working a 16-hour day. So it's hard work, so be prepared for that. So basically, I'm going to ask the question here. Is anyone interested in making money? Okay. Have you ever tried to sell anything online? Okay. So this is from South Park, and it's step 1, collect underpants. Step 2, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 3, profit. So this is kind of the typical. I mean, this happens a lot on the internet. You know, everybody has an idea and they want to launch a product or a company, and they just, this is their thinking. They kind of skip the step 2 there about, what it takes to actually sell a product online, what it takes to actually launch a company, what it takes to actually create a product, and what it takes to actually get profit. Because profit's actually the easiest part of the equation once you go through step 2, which is actually a lot of work. So we're gonna talk about what a minimum viable product is. So most people, when you're trying to develop a product, you need to figure out what exactly it is that what your minimum viable product is, so that you're not spending too many resources on and wasting time developing something that might not even necessarily get used. So a minimum viable product, commonly referred to as an MVP, is a product with the highest return on investment, ROI, versus risk. It is a business, marketing, and engineering strategy. An MVP is a product offering that creates value or solves a problem for a potential customer. So this is really a strategy for how you run the business, marketing, and engineering side of your company. So you really are encompassing all of those things, and here is a list of reasons why. It enables you to test and iterate with minimal resources. So if anyone's got a budget or they're bootstrapping, this comes in really handy because you're not spending a ton of money and you're able to kind of test your concept before you actually start selling anything. It also enables you to collect data to make data-driven decisions so that you know exactly what you're doing and what the response is from your potential customer base. This also reduces wasted development hours. It provides a product early to customers, creates value for your customers, and also establishes a platform and a foundation for future products and features. So a major issue with launching anything really is everybody wants to add features. So you get feature creep, where there's just a list of features that just keeps growing and growing and growing, and then you bring in another developer and he has his list of features, and then you bring on another person you're partnering with and they want another list of features. So the next thing you know, you've got a giant list of features and you have no idea what your product is. So an MVP is your way of figuring out what your focus and what your single product is that creates value. So once you figure out kind of what your focus is for creating value for your potential customer, you can, before you even do anything, you can do what's called a pre-launch. So you research and test your market. So Facebook, Reddit, Quora are really good for social validation. So when I'm trying to test an idea, I will literally go on Reddit, I will go to a particular subreddit that I know matches whatever category that I'm interested in. So or sometimes I'll even just do it to our entrepreneur, and I will ask a large group of people online, if this is a concept they're interested in. So it's a really good way to get social validation before you do anything. It's also another good way to find out if somebody else is already doing this. So, which brings me to my next point, which is study competition and differentiate your product. So a big problem these days is everybody copies what everyone else is doing, and they don't do anything new or original. You're not going to get anywhere with that model. it's actually Steve Jobs who kind of made this famous in the 90s, saying that, great artists steal, and it was, I think, originally a Pablo Picasso quote. I'm going to have to disagree with Steve Jobs on this one. Sometimes it's actually better to do the exact opposite of what your competition is doing so that you can differentiate what you're doing from your competition. So a lot of the times, especially on the internet, you just see this duplication of all these different concepts, and nobody, there's really nothing different between the products other than branding and a couple different things. So sometimes you have to figure out, like, okay, so let's try doing the opposite and see where we get from there. So then in that process, you might actually find an original idea that will help you develop a better product. Then thirdly, you need to build a list of potential customers and engage them. And you should have a list or a method to gain customers before you build anything. So I can't stress this last point enough. This is probably the most important thing to take from this presentation, is distribution. If you don't have distribution for whatever your product is, no one's gonna see it. I'm sure there's plenty of people in here who have built something really, really cool, and they thought it was gonna be awesome, and they thought they were gonna launch it, and it finally goes live, and crickets. Nothing happens. Nobody shows up, nobody knows your product exists, your website's live, but nobody knows it's there. So you need to figure out a way to get access to a potential customer base before you actually start building anything. So the reason for this is you can actually engage that potential customer base before you build your product. So you can actually ask them what they want. You can get feedback from customers, potential customers, you can interact with them. You might even find a potential customer who wants to partner with you on the product and has something to offer that you didn't think of or that you needed and you didn't know how to do. So there's a lot of different methods to gain customers out there. So that is really something you should be thinking about from the pre-launch phase. So more on going to building a list. So you want to try to collect a targeted, high-quality list of potential customers. So you're seeking people who are trendsetters. You're seeking people who are early adopters. You're seeking people kind of probably more like you than your future potential customer base. So if you've got an idea that you think millions of people could use, well, first you have to convince someone like you that it's a useful idea. And then if you can convince 10 people, and if those 10 people can each convince 10 people, it extrapolates over time, and they start doing the work and evangelizing your products for you. So you really want to focus on finding people that are going to be able to do that for you, that are going to be able to give you feedback, that actually have some skin in the game themselves. So then what you want to do from there is engage them in what's called a long-form sales campaign. So long-form sales campaigns originated actually the concept probably dates back to early printing days. It was this concept of publishing content that eventually leads to selling a product. So what's really cool about the internet is we can still do this now, and you can break this up into small digestible pieces. So you can start breaking up. So instead of having one giant long form sales pitch, you can take that pitch and turn it into a video, a blog post, a presentation. You can take all of that, all these different things, and kind of put them together, and then use these variety of tools to be able to interact with your potential customer base. So MailChimp is a really useful tool. It is an email sending tool. Aweber and SendGrid are very similar to MailChimp. They accomplish similar goals. On the WordPress side of things, I included 2 plugins, Gravity Forms and Bloom Opt-in by Elegant Themes. These are both forms for collecting email addresses, doing surveys, being able to collect information from your potential customer base on your website. So if you can get someone to your website, you can use Gravity Forms and Bloom Opt-in to actually capture new email addresses. So people who are potentially interested in your product. So then you've actually, now at this point, you should have researched your product, you should have some social validation, you should have a list of potential customers. You may have already engaged them and started talking to your customers to find out what they're working on. And now you've actually got to build your product. So the most important thing to do is to solve a problem or to create value for your potential customer. So you don't really need to worry about features, you really need to focus on problem solving. That's probably the most important thing to take from this slide, is solving a problem for a potential customer. Because if your product doesn't solve a problem or doesn't create value, then no one's gonna give you their email address, no one's gonna pay money for this, no one's even gonna follow your campaign if you're not creating value for them. So you need to focus on finding the simplest solution to setting the foundation to build your vision on. So again, this means taking that really long list of all the cool stuff you want to go do and just focusing on the minimum viable product and creating a product that you can build on later so that you can eventually start to stack on extra layers and add all those extra features over time. And then from there, you need to accept not knowing how to get there and find a minimum viable product that solves a problem and creates value that they're willing to use in exchange for an email address, potentially reading some emails, watching some videos, and eventually pay you money for. So if you can't get someone to go to your website, give up an email address, then you're not going to be able to sell them anything. You have to offer them something of value to even get them to that point. Then once you get that email address, you have to engage them in some form of campaign to eventually lead them to a sale. And you're going to have dropout in all of these different phases of doing this. You're going to, for example, you could send 1,000 people to your website and get one email address. You could get, then from there, let's say you collect 100 email addresses, you might only be able to convince 10 people of that 100 people to actually buy something. This is totally normal. It is a numbers game. There's no, there's absolutely like no other way to accomplish this. The number of people who visit your website is going to be greater than the number of email addresses you get. The number of sales that you get eventually is going to be less than the number of total email addresses you have. So you just kind of have to accept all of this. You also have to accept not necessarily knowing how you're going to build out the later stages of your company and knowing all of that from the beginning, because a lot of this stuff will hash itself out over time and you're going to have to pivot. So you may have a concept or an idea going into this product originally, but then you're going to get further into it and find out that that idea doesn't work. You're going to get validation back from your potential customer base, and they're going to say, well, that idea, we're not quite interested, but you might get feedback that says, everybody's interested in this other idea instead. So you can't predict the future, and you shouldn't try. There's really no point in trying to do that. So it's really, again, just keep focusing on your MVP and keep focusing on your customer base and engaging them. So once you've started to build your product, you're in development, you have to figure out your store. So this is really where WordPress and e-commerce comes into the equation. So the two best e-commerce plugins for WordPress are WooCommerce and Easy Digital Download. WooCommerce, as I'm sure some of you probably know, just got purchased by Automattic. So my money is on it's going to be around for a while. Easy Digital Download is also a very, very solid e-commerce plugin, especially if you're not dealing with shipping or any physical goods. So I would say it's, from a code standpoint, it's better. From an overall extendability standpoint, you might want to go with WooCommerce. Then from there, you've got to find an e-commerce friendly theme and customize your store. You really don't want to make your store complicated. You need a store that is really simple and easy for your customer to use. So at Cyberchimps, we actually removed several steps from the checkout process in WooCommerce, and that was the first thing we did, was take away some of the amount of data that users needed to enter to make a purchase, and we simplified the purchase process. You do not want customers to have to fill out an address or a bunch of unnecessary information for selling a simple product. Let's say you're selling an ebook. Do you really need the address of the person you're sending an ebook to or a PDF file? Probably not. There's other ways to get that information from that customer later, and you don't necessarily need it to kind of delay your sales process. Because the longer your sales and your checkout process in your shopping cart, the more the customer has time to think about it and actually change their mind. So you kind of want to set your store up for an impulse buy, so that somebody, when they get excited about it, can actually just buy it. So from there, you need to set up your hosting on a cloud-enabled scalable hosting solution. I can't stress that enough as well, because you have no idea how many people are going to show up, especially if you've got a solid list and you're doing a lot of marketing behind your product. You might get overwhelmed and you might need to add resources to your website. WooCommerce is very resource intensive. You need a server that has a lot of memory, as well as everything else. So you want to make sure you're hosted on a solid host. I would probably recommend WP Engine. We hosted Cyberchimps on Pagely. That they probably have one of the best enterprise solutions for larger scale sites. There's GoDaddy. They've got a pretty good solution for smaller to medium-sized sites. They just redid their hosting about a year and a half ago for WordPress, so they've got a pretty solid offering at a lower price point now. So that is a really critical point, because you don't want your website to go down in the middle of a purchase process.
Have you checked out Google Domains?
Google Domains? Yeah.
Google is getting into the domain space.
Yeah.
And any opinion on that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, we can.
So the question was about Google Domains and if that applies to this. Your domain name really, your DNS server has more to do with the speed at which people are accessing your site, more so than necessarily where the domain name is registered.
They provide hosting with the domain.
Yeah, so I really would stress sticking to a WordPress-enabled company, because they know how to set up their stack to actually work with WordPress, especially if you're running WooCommerce, because it is resource intensive.
I think Google does use WordPress to build a website.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would go with one of these guys. But yeah. So anyways, to keep once again, going back to keeping the purchase process simple and mobile friendly. So the majority of people these days, their computing device is a mobile phone. They're not on laptops, they're not on computers, they're on mobile devices. So if somebody can buy your product from their mobile phone without having to jump through too many steps, then you're going to get impulse buys on mobile, which many people are still trying to figure out. It's new territory, but that's where you want to be thinking, because that's the present and also the future. Then from there, final point is set up an affiliate network. So there's a really good affiliate plugin called Affiliate WP. It's actually by the same developer who does Easy Digital Download. So what an affiliate network is it enables you to work with people who already have a list. So these are guys that have been building their own email lists, that have their own websites, that own coupon websites. They have traffic, and they have traffic you want that you don't have. So setting up an affiliate network enables them to potentially get a cut of every sale of your product. So they will do the legwork for you. Enabling an affiliate network and getting connected to the right affiliates can totally change your entire launch. For example, coupon sites drive a ton of traffic. RetailMeNot is one of the largest. We used to release coupons on RetailMeNot on Cyberchimps. Every time we did a product launch, we'd do like a 20% coupon code, throw it up on RetailMeNot. It would just drive a huge volume of traffic that we didn't have access to on our own. So if you're trying to build a list, I would focus potentially on finding affiliates. Because if you can find 10 affiliates and they've got lists of 10,000, 20,000 people already in your market, then you just cut them in. Especially if you're selling a digital product, then your overhead is typically minimal and you've got profit to share. So if you can, and then two, if you can establish a good relationship with affiliates, they'll keep coming back to you and you can keep going back to them. It's a really solid strategy for building your list and selling your products and getting traffic if you don't have any. So now we're actually getting to the pre-launch itself. So all of the other steps we went through, we aren't even really to the planning stage of pre-launch yet. We're just now getting there. So it's important to prepare all of your launch content, your website, your store, your videos, your blog posts, your press releases, your images, and your product page before you launch. You want to have all of this content together before, like possibly, at least a week, maybe longer. Some of my product launches, we had this stuff together months in advance. And especially if you start launching multiple products, you'll kind of figure out a routine and a formula for doing this. But this will totally help ease your product launch process because as I said at the beginning of the presentation, I do not know how to launch a product without working a 16-hour day. This will help cut that down and make it easier because if you have all this content together, you can take that 16-hour day and break it into chunks and make it a little bit more manageable. Then as well, you're using this content, you're using your store, your website, your videos, your blog posts, your press releases, your images, and you're using all of this content to create value for your prospective customer. So what that does is it builds trust. It builds all these different things with your potential customer if you start sharing information with them and start creating value with them before you try to sell them something. Yeah.
Back to the talking about affiliate networks, I'm seeing a lot of people these days are using Kickstarter or Indiegogo as opposed to going to the affiliates to initially get.
If you're raising money and you're using Indiegogo, the question was, if anyone didn't hear it, is
They're just selling products. I swear to God,
they're just selling products.
Yeah.
I mean, they're using. So what they're doing is they're using then Indiegogo and Kickstarter for distribution because Indiegogo and Kickstarter drive traffic to those products, and that gets initial interest. So that's not the intended use case for either of those sites, but I have seen people do that. This is common also in the music industry. There's some artists that, well, they're also trying to raise money to get their albums recorded, but they kind of do the same thing. They purposely release through one of those types of sites to get some extra attention and kind of start this. But that, you're absolutely right. This same concept applies to that.
And there's a guy who's got average watches. He just sold over $1 million worth.
Yeah. So Product Hunt does that as well.
That's for product launches.
Yeah. So there's a wide variety of these. I mean, there's subreddits for this. You could use press releases. You can, a press release, you can pretty much pay to get on any major tech news website if you've got the cash. I don't know if they want me saying that or telling people that, but if you pay a little extra, sometimes there are press release services that do have connections with TechCrunch and all these major blogs and blog networks. So there's definitely ways to engage customers, and this is why in my earlier slide I said you want to build a list or have a method for distribution. So that method could be Kickstarter, it could be Indiegogo, it could be WordPress.org, it could be a theme or a plugin. It could be that it could just be that you know a guy who runs a major tech blog and he'll do a blog post on it. That could be your method. Those things are all applicable for building your list and getting customers. So yeah, anyhow, going back to presentation, we've got engage your list using product launch formula or drip campaign to entice early adopters, not necessarily everyone. So again, we're going back to focusing on finding that one person that's going to use your product, give you feedback, that's going to tell you, hey, you need to change this, or I'd like this extra feature added. Those customers are so valuable because the information they're going to provide you is going to enable you to build a better product. So you want to get as many early adopters that have their own social networks, that possibly have their own networks or their own methods of distribution as well, so that they can also evangelize your product. And the key thing here is you want to attract attention from potential customers by giving value before selling them on your product. So these days, everyone's got a cell phone going off all day. We're sitting on a computer, you've got Twitter going, you've got Facebook notifications, you're getting emails all day. Then you turn on the TV, it's all advertising. You walk down the street, it's all advertising. The amount of information that we're exposed to on a daily basis right now is it's higher than it's ever been. So you've got to find a way to potentially cut through that. And the best way to do that is actually to attract people to you rather than you seeking them. So it's not, it's a hard concept to really put into practice, but once you figure out and kind of get the hang of it, it just kind of naturally kicks in, and all of a sudden, you don't have to put in that extra work to find people, they're finding you. So you want to set your product up, you want to set your business up in a way that you're easy to find, and so that you can start to attract them. So that also goes back to doing like the drip campaigns and the long form sales pitch and using a product launch formula, because what you can do is you can engage that potential customer base using those techniques. And that brings us to our pre-launch emotional triggers. So you can use all of these triggers to literally get people to buy your product. This right here is power. So the perfect example of this right now, this is happening in this very moment. I'm speaking to you as an authority right now. So you are in this room because you came to an event and a ritual, and if you've come here more than once, then this is a ritual for you to attend a community. So these are all things that you can build into your sales pitch and your long form drip campaigns and your sales campaigns. These are all triggers that work on a human level and on a psychological level. So these, and then the interesting thing is when you start to combine these, that's when you get the most effect. So when you have somebody who's speaking as an authority and they give you something, then you want to reciprocate that and you want to give something back to them. This is innate psychological behavior. Trust. You can build trust by speaking to somebody as an authority, by potentially reciprocating and giving them something. Anticipation, creating that desire to get something at a certain time. So, for example, Apple with the Apple Watch, I mean, how many years have we been waiting for this thing to come out? By the time the watch actually came out, they didn't even have it in stores. You had to order it online only, and then even I ordered mine within the first 45 minutes, and it still took a month to ship, and I didn't get it on the ship date. So anticipation is a huge trigger. Events and rituals, another huge trigger. We're in one right now. It works. Likability, presenting yourself, setting yourself up to be likable, presentable. That's helps build authority, that helps build trust. Community. Community is probably one of the most powerful things on this list. It's what drives people to come together to accomplish a goal. I mean, if there's any example of community, it's WordPress. The entire WordPress ecosystem is built around that psychological trigger. Scarcity, telling people something is rare, and that there's a limited number entices them to want to get it because there's a limited number and not everyone's going to be able to get it. Social proof. This is validation, which I was even talking about earlier. for your own product idea. And these are all triggers and things that you can use yourself to also validate your own products and use these different things to make your launch an event itself. So again, the idea here is to build confidence with your prospective customers. So an example of scarcity is, let's say you have a particular profession. Let's say you're a tennis player and you know how to do a tennis swing that can beat your opponent every time. You can put that you can teach people how to do that, put it in a video, but say, I'm only gonna sell this video to 15 people. Now you can charge people $1,000 for that video instead of $5 or $1. So if you just made that video available for $1 and you're trying to sell it to 1 million people to make $1 million, then that's a lot harder task than just selling to 10 people at $100 each. So scarcity drives up the potential perceived value of your product. Really important trigger. Social proof, social media is built on this concept. Yelp is social proof. Facebook is social proof. Reddit is social proof. Quora is social proof. The entire concept of social media is based on this psychological principle. So you can use all of these different things in your marketing materials and in your drip campaigns to literally convince people to buy your product. It's a really powerful thing, and it's something you have to actively make a choice to be responsible with, because you can also mislead people with these things. And you don't want to do that because you want to build confidence that you're selling something of value to your customer, and you want them to come back because you want them to buy version 2.0. You want them to buy the next product line that you come out with, because going back to that whole concept of an MVP, you didn't necessarily get the full product that you had when you were coming into this idea originally. You just have your minimum viable product right now. So you obviously then at that point have more ideas, more features, more products that you can launch after this. So these are all really important things that you can use and implement to start selling immediately and start selling your MVP product so that you can then eventually roll out later versions. So this is the actual launch. At this point, you've worked a lot. You've had to build a list. You've had to build a product. You've had to put together your store. You've had to assemble all of these different components. You've had to become a marketer. You've had to become a product developer. You've had to become a web developer and an e-commerce expert. Like, you've had to learn and go through a lot to get to this point. And you put in all the work in your pre-launch. So this is your magic moment that you've worked for. This is the point where you open your shopping cart to pre-orders or to purchase your product. So this is finally the point where you're asking your customer for money. And this is where you're saying, here's a product that I'm offering, and you can finally order it. Next, you need to be aware that your plans won't always work. As I said, I've launched over 20 products in the last 3 to 4 years. Every product launch, something went wrong. It's inevitable. There is no magic solution to a product launch. It is a lot of hard work, but you just have to learn from each launch, and you have to control that experience and control what you can and let go of the things that you can't. Because something out of your control will happen with every product launch, and you just kind of have to let it go. It's inevitable. Launching on the right day is also a very important thing. You don't want to just launch a product because you want to launch the product. You have to launch when you know your customers are actually going to be there to hit the buy button. So you don't want to launch at 3 in the morning on a Saturday. That's probably not a great idea. You want to try and capture people's attention when you know that they're going to be on their devices or at their computer or at an event or whatever the situation it is. You want to try to figure that out. So What I found in my experience, never launch anything on a Monday. Mondays are usually consumed by commercial press releases. So in the news cycle, that's when Microsoft, Apple, that's when all these major tech companies and all these other product companies are constantly releasing press releases, trying to get press attention. On Tuesday, you've got a better chance of cutting through some of that. Mondays are really cluttered. Wednesday is a good launch day. Thursday is a good launch day. I have seen successful launches on a Friday. I've been in a situation where I've done some launches on a Friday. I don't recommend it. If you have to, it's okay, but I would caution against it. But again, it depends on what your product is. If you think your customer is going to make the purchase over the weekend, then absolutely launch on a Thursday or a Friday, because then you're giving them the weekend to make that purchase, and you've given them Thursday and Friday as lead time to make that purchase on Saturday or Sunday. Again, I do not recommend launching on weekends, but it does depend on your product. Another important thing to do is also get a lot of sleep the night before your product launch. Because as I said before, something will go wrong. So if something does go wrong and your e-commerce store goes down, you've got to fix it. So you're going into I've been in these situations. You go into like chaos mode. You're like trying to solve the problem, and next thing you know, 3 hours have passed by, and you finally solve it. But you never know. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot that can go wrong because there's so many working pieces. Which is why I spoke to having a good hosting provider, which is why I spoke to simplifying your checkout process and a lot of the other things I recommended, because I'm trying to simplify this process so that when you actually do hit the button and open your shopping cart and do accept those pre-orders, that you're actually ready and everything's already in place, and you can learn from all of my mistakes by listening to this presentation so that you don't go through some of the product launches I've been through. Because I've had some doozies. So then from there, you get to shut up and take your customers' money, and you finally get to profit. So there is a magic moment where you get to watch the orders come in. It does happen. I did it with CyberChimps. It's possible. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of dedication, but you can get to a point where your customers are begging for your product. We would seed, that we were releasing a product sometime, months in advance. I would personally get emails. We'd get hit up on Twitter. Can you just send us an early copy? I'll pay extra. Like, if you can use those triggers and those emotional triggers, set up your drip campaigns, set up a product launch formula to be able to entice them, you can literally get to a point where your customer base demands that you sell them your product. And at that point, it's literal. You can literally get to this point using all these different techniques to convince your customer base that your product is going to create value for them. So that is our presentation. And we're now doing questions and answers. In the back there.
Could you tell me about any of the shopping cart abandonment solutions you may have used either within WordPress or?
Yeah, there's. So he asked about shopping cart abandonment. So a lot of people do get to the checkout process when they are potentially interested in buying your product. They will literally fill out their email address, they'll get the cart ready, and they just don't hit that purchase button. So there are solutions for this, and I was using one through an affiliate network actually, mainly because it was a time issue for me. I didn't want to go set up an alternative solution. There's now better solutions. There's possibly even some plugins for this. especially if you're using WooCommerce. I was using an affiliate service because they used a JavaScript application that actually read any input that the customer made. So part of our checkout process was you had to enter your email address to get to a certain point in the checkout process. So we would capture that email before they hit the buy button. So then if they didn't hit the buy button, we would email them and offer them a coupon code. And then 3 days later, we'd hit them with another coupon code for even more off. I can't remember the name of the company off the top of my head, but there is a ton of solutions for this. If you Google shopping cart abandonment and whatever your e-commerce solution is, there's a ton of results. Is there anything more specific?
Well, there were a ton. I thought maybe you would be able to narrow it down.
Yeah, I mean, they all solve the same problem. Yeah. Sorry?
Any sense on the frequency? Like, with all these products you launch, you get a sense that it's best to do it within an hour, next day, when you're following up with these emails?
It depends on the product. So a really good thing for everyone to go Google is a product launch formula. I didn't have enough time to really go into that with this presentation because I wanted to speak to the overall strategy. But the best game plan is typically like a 7 to 10 day. I've done up to a month. It really just depends. There's a lot of different factors that go into making those decisions, especially depending upon what your product is. Because if you're selling a book versus selling something that's time dependent, you're probably going to want to do a shorter campaign for something that's time dependent. Or if you've got an event at a particular time and you want to get as many people to show up as possible, the longer you announce that, the better. So if you announce 3 months in advance, and then you've got 3 months, and you can start slowly dripping emails and building up a campaign to get them there, and then you want to ramp it up towards the end. So there's tons of different formulas to be able to do this, and it really comes down to the quality of your list. It comes down to your product type, and it comes down to what you're selling.
Are all your products software?
Yes.
Are they all WordPress related?
With Cyberchimps, everything I did was WordPress related, yeah. So that was my sole focus for the last 4 or 5 years of my life.
I have a question regarding that specifically. Thinking of themes and plugins. Blasting an idea for a theme or plugin out to Quora or Reddit or something or social media like that seems like you're a pretty big risk in just giving up the weight because those sort of things are easy for a lot of people to do.
It's about execution. It's not about the idea necessarily. So everybody in this room has had a multi-million-dollar idea. That doesn't mean that you've been able to execute it. So it's really, I mean, at this point, like guarding your idea, unless you truly have some kind of intellectual property that just simply like is, life-changing, my opinion is share it, because you'll learn something when you do. There's really no downside to it because, so let's say one of your competitors sees this idea and goes and does it. So what? If you know how to do it and you can execute on that idea better, and they've proven that this idea is actually a good idea and they're actually getting a customer base, good, you've just validated your idea. I mean, Cyberchimps was one of the first WordPress theme companies to implement responsive design. Google now punishes you if you don't have a responsive website. So, here we are all these years later, and it just is. And that's what happens with any good idea is you get to a certain point where it just becomes normal. So even if you're early stage at an idea, there's always going to be competition. There's always going to be someone trying to do it. So the only thing you can focus on is controlling your experience, building your list, building your product, and building a better product. Yeah.
Was there ever a time where you began something and actually just walked away from it because you realized, or whenever you realized, but have you ever, because I think that's hard, just to
Yeah.
walk away if you don't think it's going to.
So I just sold CyberChimps. Not that I don't think that it's going to keep working. It is. I got into a situation where I got too big too fast. We had 4.9 million downloads of all of our themes. It was too much for my team and I to handle. So it's now at a company that's bigger, that has more resources. So they're going to be able to continue it forward. But yes, there's absolutely been times when we've had to abandon products. I, even as part of my assets, that we just sold, like there was probably 12 ideas, designs that we hadn't built yet. There's always products and ideas that you want to go do. There's one that I never got to build. It was a music theme. Gosh, I've been sitting on that design for 3 years. I hope the new owners go build it. There's definitely a point where in some products where you just have to walk away. One of the things that I've been practicing lately is letting ideas like that go and then seeing if they come back. What I've found in my experience is the good ideas always kind of find a way to work themselves back into your life. And you just kind of have to accept that it might or it might not. So a lot of the times when you have an idea like that, you might give up on it. For example, I've got a friend. She has a startup idea. She built a website. She started getting some traction. She totally just gave up on it. 6 months later, she decided to try again. Now she was just on Shark Tank. So there's always a second chance and a third chance for an idea or product idea.
Sort of have a follow-up question to that. It sounds like you decided that personally you did not want to grow or accommodate the growth.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
More like it grew bigger and faster than I knew what to do with. I'm really good at starting up. I'm really good at product development. I'm really good at launching things. That is what I'm good at. So I got to a point where my time wasn't going there. It was going to managing the business, and there are better managers in the world than me.
How long does it take you to get the theme? Like the one for this?
Average theme took between 2 to 6 weeks, depending upon the theme and the code base. Yeah. Also depending on how much money I had at the time and resources and how many people were working on it too. Because if you can get like 8 people to work on it, then it gets done a lot sooner. But
I guess like how many engineering weeks did you guys?
engineering time was probably, it was about the same. It was about a 2 to 6 week cycle, depending upon the product. Yeah,
Like one person.
yeah.
And then what about plugins?
Sorry, what was?
Plugins, like
Plugins? Every plugin's different because there's plugins that are super simple that someone wrote in an hour, and then there's WooCommerce, which is an entire e-commerce platform. So
how long did it take to build that one?
that project's been in existence for what? Probably 6 years. It was originally Jigo Shop. It was originally another e-commerce platform. I don't even think it was originally for WordPress. And then it was forked by a different company. So they copied someone else's code, then took it, then adapted it for WordPress, then built a company around it. And then WooThemes eventually, because WooThemes forked it actually.
I can comment on that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, hi, I'm Paul. My background is I worked at 10up, which is mostly custom theme development, custom plugin development. I also attempted to release a custom plugin and monetize it, and didn't follow any of Trent's advice. So I failed miserably. I didn't know Trent. I developed that I was trying to monetize was a fairly large code base, and I probably dumped 300 engineering hours into it before I knew it would work. That is stupid. Don't do that. And then a reasonable MVP, I'd say, would be 100 hours or less. And in reality, you take Trent's advice and test your product idea on Reddit, get customers who want to buy your thing before you make the thing, so that you don't make the thing if nobody wants to buy it.
Yeah. That exactly what Paul said. You don't want to. Exactly. But yeah, you really want to validate your concept, and you want to know that your idea is going to work before you spend time building it. And the range of engineering hours totally depends on the project and what you're trying to build.
Regarding validating the product, you
Yeah.
said you were going to put it on Reddit and everything, so that's really good. I really believe that would work. But the problem is like when you post it on Reddit or even ask a person, they'll be like, yeah, it's good. You say that's validating, or how do you?
So
validate
you get tricky. So you go back to using those psychological triggers, and there's other triggers obviously that exist in the world as well. So the question was, when you're trying to get social validation, how do you ask the question so that people don't give you generic feedback that's kind of useless? So what I do is I ask a specific question. So rather than tell them my grand idea of what I want to go build, I ask them the one or two sticking points of that idea, and I just ask that question. So rather than going on Reddit and saying, I have this product idea, I want to go build this, and I want to do a company, and I want to do this, and this, and this, and this, I go post, does anyone have a problem with this? What are some solutions for this potential problem? Or you could even say, I'm having a problem with this in my experience, and what solutions do you have to offer? So there's other ways to validate the idea by restructuring the question that you ask. So you want to structure your question in a way that you can get the response you're looking for specifically without necessarily trying to sell them on the whole idea and concept so that you overwhelm. Because if you post a paragraph of your entire game plan, most people are going to be like, okay, that's cool. Like, if you get a response, if they even read it to the bottom. So, for example, on Reddit, like there's the too long didn't read. That's what your question should be. It's just that one little short question, like, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts on X, Y, and Z? How would you solve this problem? I think I have a solution for this problem. Does anyone else have this problem? You want to ask. And then, too, you can also ask other questions. And you can also, if you're using Reddit, for example, you can reply. So if somebody does post an answer, you can ask them a follow-up question. So you can also interact with them and start getting feedback that way as well.
How many responses would you think is a valid number?
I mean, I've had some projects where I was just looking for one yes, because I'm just trying to make sure like my idea is not crazy and that there's at least one other person in the world that would buy it. So, if there's 100 no's and there's only one yes, I might reconsider. But it's, again, it really depends on what your product is. But if you are content with just selling to that one yes, then you at least know you have one customer. So again, it really depends. If you want to, you just want to kind of gauge, not necessarily, the yeses from the nos, but also kind of gauge other ideas and just kind of take an open-minded approach to it, and see what other information that pops up, see what kind of response you get. Because sometimes I will post something and then someone just posts a link to that service or that idea and it already exists, and then everybody just upvotes that one idea and no one else replies. And I'm like, okay, so this has been done. But that doesn't necessarily mean that my idea is invalid. That just means I need to go study what they're doing and then figure out if I have something to differentiate to make my own product off of. I think we had a couple other questions, or
Well,
is it a follow-up to his?
I've worked in advertising for 3 decades and actually worked with ad agencies for Apple that spent millions of dollars to see what people thought about their products. I would say you've got to be very, very careful when you're doing this kind of thing. It could mean you don't know how to communicate properly. It could mean maybe the color's wrong, maybe a font's off. There's 1,000 reasons why somebody can negatively react to it. I can tell you, for Apple, there was a lot of stuff behind the iPod before anybody thought anything about it. So we need to be really careful about that. But I did actually want to ask a question about commerce specifically. Is there ever a situation where you can think of not having PayPal available? And also, in addition to that, what is also a must besides, say, Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal?
So payment processing is kind of a tricky one. PayPal is probably PayPal was my go-to solution for CyberChimps. We did implement Stripe, which was great at first because I had a significant increase in sales from implementing Stripe. And then 3 months later, I had a significant increase in fraud. So the problem with Stripe is they'll accept any credit card. PayPal actually validates the person in the account to know that they have money. And they do a lot of fraud protection. So PayPal's really, really good about that. And my refund rate and my fraud rate with PayPal was extremely low. Stripe was really, really high.
Apple Pay, any experience?
Apple Pay wasn't out, and I hadn't implemented it yet. I've been watching Bitcoin just out of curiosity, and I've been watching its value decline. So there's a lot of things in play with that. I mean, currency, we go to war over currency. Currency is currency is a really big contention point in society. So the banks will do anything to prevent new currencies from existing. So a lot of Bitcoins, for example, a lot of them are now actually possessed by the US government because they raided the Silk Road, they raided exchanges, and now they're in control of most of the Bitcoins. And that then drove the value of Bitcoin down. So I'm a little iffy on cryptocurrencies right now. I think in the future it could be interesting, but it's a risk to accept a cryptocurrency currently. And you have to be in a position, if you're going to do that, to accept that risk.
And you can't imagine a scenario where PayPal shouldn't accept PayPal.
I mean, PayPal solves the problem pretty well.
International though, because wasn't that an issue here and there?
Yeah, so that's why I implemented Stripe, was to make up the difference for international customers. I mean, there were even some instances where like we'd get an email and like I don't know if it's true or not, but it would be someone in a country that PayPal didn't accept payments for. Sometimes we just sent them the product for free, just because it wasn't worth figuring out how to charge them money for in their country. It wasn't a problem I wanted to solve. So yeah, PayPal is if you're US based, PayPal is your default. They've really got a handle on it. There's also Square if you're dealing with physical transactions and taking credit cards. And there's a couple other payment processors out there.
With Stripe, when you get the fraud, what happens? Do you just lose the money?
Yes, I just lost a lot of money. So with Stripe, it was pretty bad. I would get phone calls from banks and customers that. So what happened was when we implemented Stripe, people started using our site to validate stolen credit card numbers. So they figured out that if you go onto our website and go through the checkout process, you could validate, if the purchase goes through, then they know that card's still active. So they would go make a digital transaction for a digital good to validate the credit card to see if the credit card was active, and then they'd resell that credit card number to a third party. So there's a huge, I mean, this is a huge, huge problem right now in the world. It got worse after the Target hack. It got worse after major retailers have been hacked. Home Depot, gosh, I mean, the government's, yeah. The IRS was hacked recently. There's just a ton of hacking, and there's a ton of, this kind of stuff happening these days. So there's really, the only thing you can really do in that situation is protect yourself by using a PayPal and enabling all the security checks and all the security, like we set all of our security stuff on like the highest measures. We were cross-validating zip codes to credit cards to try and prevent fraud, but there's still fraud. It's the cost of doing business.
So cryptocurrencies are a great solution to that hacking. How come it's not working? Like it's not.
So technologically, cryptocurrencies solve that problem absolutely, and I'm 100% with you there. And I think it's a cool concept, and I wish that's how money worked. But again, it goes back to the infrastructures in play here. Again, there have been wars over currency. It's about control, and really, it's about control.
The control is only there until there's a better solution. So
Maybe.
Can I comment?
Go ahead, Paul.
The problem with cryptocurrencies is they're trying to change the economic system on a global scale. The thing that's nice about PayPal, and this is something I'm interested in, is that PayPal didn't start as a money processing company. They started as a security company. This is in a book called Founders at Work. They started and PayPal just wanted to do encrypted transfers of information or IOUs. And they had a demo on their site, and people kept trying to pay for eBay stuff or online transactions using their demo. And they're like, leave us alone. We don't do financial transactions. And then finally they got wise and they thought, oh, maybe that's what people want us to do. But at its core, like all PayPal does is it goes through insane security measures to solve the gaping holes in the financial system as it exists. They don't have to follow banking rules. They're not FDIC insured. If you're a PayPal customer and you have like $100,000 in your PayPal account, PayPal can shut you down, and they do not have to give you a dime. They don't have to follow any laws of banking. While the bank shuts you down, they have to follow FDIC regulations. So the reason PayPal is so much better for an online product is because they're exempt from the law, and they can abuse their customers, and so you as the merchant don't get abused.
Yep.
And Bitcoin companies don't provide that usability and that same capabilities yet.
There's a normal person who doesn't use Bitcoin.
Yeah, the average consumer doesn't use Bitcoin yet. So, and then the value of Bitcoin is, I think the last time I saw it, it was around like 250, 260 US conversion rate. So Bitcoin, yeah, it's something you could experiment with if your revenue stream is stable and you've got some money in the bank and you're interested in collecting some cryptocurrency. But I would consider it as like, it's the same thing as collecting Pogs or trading cards right now. I wouldn't necessarily consider it like actual, money is fiction. It's really only what people put value into it. So, it's only worth what someone's willing to pay you in another currency for it, potentially. Mike, I think you've got a question.
Okay, so I'm bodying on WordPress to WooCommerce to PayPal, and let's say that my MVP works and I have a group of interested people who might want to buy my second thing. What do you recommend for sort of going forward, some sort of customer database, customer relationship management software that works nicely with the other pieces in this puzzle so that I can sort of keep a
Yeah, I actually tried to build this. So I was experimenting with using Salesforce. It's super expensive. There's a couple other companies out there that have CRM. So what you're talking about is called a CRM. So there's a lot of CRM solutions out there. Gosh.
Just the question being, do any of them work well with these other pieces we're talking about?
Yeah, yes and no. I was using HubSpot for a while with HubSpot. It's really expensive. You can pretty much build your own version of it using Gravity Forms and some WordPress plugins. So
Streak is nice.
Streak,
Streak, yeah.
is it a newer one?
Streak Android, it's a meta layer on top of Gmail. So if you get
Oh,
emails
yeah.
over support, you can add information for tracking the customer and having like a sales pipeline or a support pipeline or whatever.
What was that called?
Streak.com, STREAK.
There was, what, do you remember the other company we were talking to?
Infusionsoft.
Yeah, Infusionsoft is another one. Infusionsoft?
Act.
Act? Okay. There's,
Pardot is another one.
yeah, Pardot's more marketing focused. It's less of a CRM and more of a marketing tool for doing drip campaigns.
Pardot.
Pardot.
P-A-R-D-O-T.
Yeah, you're looking at least like $800 a month for Pardot.
Some sort of poor man's HubSpot hasn't been invented yet.
No, I mean, you could, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're doing like, if your intention is doing this for like marketing automation, you know, there are some plugins and some different solutions you could string together to do that. There's some extensions for WooCommerce as well to be able to do that. But yeah, this is actually a problem I'm actively trying to solve on some other startups that I'm working on right now, because there really isn't a good solution for this yet.
I'm trying to use the MailChimp. Is that like some, I don't know how far it's going to scale. It looks kind of like it sends a mail, it comes back, and then I'm not sure this is really
Yeah,
that
so
great. The plugin, right, for MailChimp into WordPress.
so MailChimp can function as your marketing component, and it
Does gather the emails like, to try to send
yeah.
them
So
to
you
form and-
so like there was one plugin I recommended, Bloom from Elegant Themes. They have an integration with MailChimp. I'm even using it on my Mystic Labs website currently. You can hook it straight to MailChimp. It'll prompt you, ask you for an email. MailChimp, their data is okay. They don't really have the same kind of like scoring mechanisms as like a Pardot or some of the other marketing solutions. So really, right now, most of the good CRM and marketing automation tools are enterprise focused. They're geared towards major companies. I think we'll probably see in the next year or so somebody try to solve this for WordPress. I think I've seen one project for a CRM solution for WordPress. I don't know where it is in the development stage. I think I just saw it on like Twitter or on a WordPress blog. I can't even recall the name right now, but
For gathering the emails, what do you recommend? Something simple, like either on the sidebar or pop up. Like you just want to
pop up.
get a white paper, download. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
easiest thing?
So landing pages and doing
No,
pop.
within WordPress though, like if you want to build it on your WordPress and then keep the emails. What's the
Pop-up that comes out, like subscribe.
There's Opt-in Monster, Bloom. Do you know some others?
Of other CRM.
Not
No.
basically to gather-
Email collection
to basically
tools,
get the
opt-in
emails.
tools.
So you like just grab it.
Gravity Forms works too.
MailChimp was Gravity
So you
Forms.
can export
Yeah.
the
You
data
click,
right
click,
from
it's
your
done.
install,
Yeah.
whatever.
It's very well integrated. It takes 10 minutes to set up.
And you can make any form, you can run a sign.
Yep. Gravity.
Or you get a CSV out, so.
Yeah, you can Gravity Forms will export whatever you want to a CSV.
Yep.
Cool. That's it. Well, actually, do you have no more questions? I'll ask the last question. Can I ask the last question?
Go for it.
Cool. This is a clarification of some data that you covered, but I thought it was maybe important to highlight as key points. The first is You mentioned that there's a clear conversion process from you're willing to give me an email to you're willing to pay for something.
Correct.
What, just industry-wide for digital product, what would be an average conversion ratio of, okay, I have 100,000 emails, what's a reasonable expectation of how many of 100,000 would pay money?
See, it totally depends because you could have 100,000 emails that no one opens. So whereas you could have a list of 1,000 emails where 70% of that list opens the email because it's targeted. So if you have a highly targeted list and you have a really high open rate, then you're going to get a higher conversion rate on your sales. Whereas you could have a list of 100,000 people and maybe get 5,000 people to open the email.
Okay, marketing engineer, what's
Yeah.
a high conversion rate and what's a low conversion rate?
I mean, low, it is industry specific, and the low end,
Never done it.
the low end is like it's 0.002% is the low end. The high end, I think probably some of my most successful product launches were probably around like it's between 6 and 8%,
But out of how many emails?
a lot.
Yeah.
And let's say hypothetically you've gathered 100 emails, have 100 engaged products, and you do the big product launch, you have your day, and you send a million people to your website in a 24-hour period,
Yeah.
and you don't use a host that is specialized in WordPress and providing hardware caching, not like software caching. What will happen?
It'll go down.
It'll go
It'll
down.
crash.
Go down really hard? What will it be?
It'll stop working.
Oh, okay. Good point. That's one point. Cool. Any final comments?
No, I think that about wraps it up. Yeah. Thanks.